Hello. I've just gotten this running a little bit early because, well, just so it started. We're still not really going to get into it for another 20 or so minutes. I'm just going to do my research. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. For those who are not familiar with this format, office hours is basically I have the stream running while I'm doing my work. You can ask me questions, you can suggest videos. I won't necessarily look at them, but I may. I do have some sort of segments planned. I've got a couple things I want to respond to over the course of the next few hours. But these are just fairly chill streams. They aren't like the sort of intense thing that we were doing with like Professor Flowers post-mortem last night. So, how's the audio? Am I audible? Is the background too loud? Yeah, we started a bit early, so we're not gonna get into it for a few minutes. Hey Barry, how you doing? Hi, Horizonberg. We started up a little bit early, so we're going to take it easy for a few minutes, and I have some segments planned. But for the time being, if you have questions, comments, anything you want me to cover, feel free to ask. We'll hopefully be a little less low energy today. I was tanked after last night, but I'm feeling a bit better this morning. Well, I guess it's afternoon now, isn't it? It all feels the same when you're indoors all day. Oh, and just for specification, I'm helping somebody with an exam, so I'm reading. It's that way. It's so weird. Like it. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So it's on this side of the screen for me. It's on that side of the screen for you. I'm looking at Aristotle's categories, which is pretty basic, but somebody's got a test. Maybe while we're waiting, it might be useful to go over briefly what we're going to be covering. So, there's two basic things I want to look at for sure, and one is sort of optional. The first one is there's apparently some disagreement going on in the vegan sphere about whether animals have rights, or specifically why. So I'm going to be looking at a response by Lewis from Perspective Philosophy to Cosmic Skeptic concerning that. I expect both are going to be a train wreck, to be totally honest. Afterwards, Zoe B's review of Annihilation I really wanted to look at. I generally have a lot of respect for Zoe B's analyses, even though the way she color codes her books rather than ordering them by subject makes me want to drill a hole in my head. So I'm looking forward to that. And afterwards, there was apparently a painfully boring debate between Vosh and Bastiat, which I might look at briefly. I don't know if we'll go through the whole thing, probably not. It's Bastiat, it's not going to be interesting, but it might be illuminating, I guess, as to how these people think. But you said in an earlier video, I think that you've worked in landscaping. Do you like doing that kind of work? No, but it pays well, and it's easy, and it doesn't take a lot of time. The main thing is it doesn't take a lot of time. I value my freedom tremendously, so I lucked out a little bit. I have the business is run by a family member, and I was able to make arrangements where I'm able to work to an extent that's, sort of like healthy for me and works with, my work schedule with respect to research and things like that, which is very rare. I'm very lucky in that respect. Do I like it? Not particularly. I mean, sometimes it's satisfying. We've moved away from landscaping and we're doing a lot more like construction type things, and some of that's fun. Like as far as that kind of thing can be fun. And it does feel good being outdoors for the first part of your day. But I can think of a lot of things I'd rather do. That said, it keeps you reasonably healthy. It's supposed to be cooling. Why is that not cooling? That's better. Yeah, construction type work can be dangerous, and I work with nice people. I don't know if I trust them fully, but I don't know. I value myself. I take pains to make sure that I'm safe. Is it raining? No, actually, it's quite sunny outside. It's just I like this ambience. It helps me focus. Plus, it means if I leave, it's not just dead air. Because these streams run long and sometimes they get up, so. How do we like the new background, by the way? I kind of like it more than the theater. I think it looks less static, because it is less static, and it's moving around, and it's more vibrant. I like it. Is that noise coming from my fireplace? No, I wish. Although I do have a fireplace now. It's electric, but it doesn't make noise. Or does it make noise? No, no, no. The Google makes noise. We're in a cyberpunk apocalypse at the moment. Or dystopia. Everything is synthetic. Was that the Trinity College Dublin library? That might have been. I forget exactly where I got that picture from. I just picked it out because I like the tone. The previous one? Hang on, let me take a look here. Oh, that's a piece of art. Are you talking about like these platforms? Anyways. Alright, I'm gonna get something quickly, and by the time I come back, we'll be starting on our first segment, I think. Alright, we're going to be starting the sequence in, We're going to be starting the first segment in about between 5 and 10 minutes. So we'll let people kind of sidle in. I'll bring it up on the screen so you guys have an idea of what to look forward to. We'll be looking at this fairly shortly. Don't know what he's thinking with that beard. He looked good with like the stubble. I don't know about the giant lumberjack thing. Mighty beards are mighty. The lumberjack thing can definitely work. It just needs some flannel. Yeah, I think it's the fact that he's wearing like all black, so it kind of slims him out, that makes the contrast a little bit strange. Like, it doesn't look bad. I just personally think he looked better with a shorter beard. But do I subscribe to political realism? What do you mean? Political realism, that can mean a few things. If you mean in international relations, no. No, not at all. Most of my work is explicitly critical of the realist stance in international relations. If what you're asking is, do I consider the political to be an essential category of the human condition or of human experience? No, I deny that as well. I think a large part of doing political theory right now has to do with escaping from these categories, or from the ideological presumption that they represent sort of essential parts of human life or whatever, or the human world or something. They're fairly recent, and you can think of them as technologies. They're ways of organizing and ways of categorizing things that are very, very recent. And were invented to solve problems. Or to describe problems, or, but no, they're not strictly speaking just simply real parts of the universe. Alright, I'm going to try and go clear my chest before we begin, and we'll get into it. I'll be right back. Oh, you meant within international relations. Yeah, so I'm not a realist in international relations. And the issue for me isn't that it's too centered around states. It's that it essentializes what states are, or rather it ossifies basically an outdated sense of what states are in order to build its theory. So all right. Let's starting to get hit again by that chest congestion, so hopefully I make it through this. But we will try. So this says, Cosmic Skeptic is wrong apparently about animal rights. Animals do have a right to life. So I think by implication, Cosmic Skeptic was arguing that animals do not have a right to life? That seems a little bit strange. I mean, it's underdetermined. I don't know what's meant by right in this context. Like, do we simply mean that they are permitted to have a life? Do we mean that they... Like, we tend not to talk about rights with respect to either irrational animals or animals whose reason can't, you know, inform our understanding. But let's try.
So Cosmic Skeptic, an incredible vegan activist who's done wonders for the community, has recently made a video on his position on animals' right to life. Cosmic Skeptic does remain vegan in this discussion, arguing that animals should be considered in the same way as humans. Although I think the...
Hang on, I don't know what it was that was just posted on the screen there. Let's take a look back here. Alex, please consider discussing veganism with a vegan deontologist who can rationally ground his position. Oh, it's just a commercial. He's just... Okay.
Cosmic Skeptic does remain vegan in this discussion, arguing that animals should be considered in the same way as humans, although I think the conclusions he reaches are false. Let's break down the video and talk about whether an animal does or does not have the right to life.
That's a cool logo. I want one
Part of
those.
the problem is the way that the word vegan is defined. It's defined in so many different ways depending on the context. For instance, if food is described as vegan, it will usually just mean food that doesn't contain any animal products. But if a person is defined as vegan, it's someone who doesn't eat those kinds of food. But if someone is an ethical vegan, then it's somebody who maybe seeks to minimize animal suffering. But if someone's an environmental vegan, then you see the point. There are like hundreds of different ways to define this term.
There is no such thing as a health vegan, there is no such thing as an environmental vegan, and there is actually no such thing as an ethical vegan. In reality, all vegans are ethical vegans. Veganism is an ethical stance, and that means that it entails considerations of other lifestyle changes which do not factor in to the consideration of the environment or your health. For example, leather. Leather does not necessarily harm your health, but vegans would avoid it. Another thing to consider is hunting. Hunting is not necessarily environmentally unsustainable if done in small amounts, yet would be unvegan because it causes harm to animals. Veganism is and must always be considered an ethical movement, and it's something that we should gatekeep.
Where the hell is he pulling this from? There are lots of people who choose veganism and are like moral anti-realists or who don't think there is an ethical imperative to do so, but they think that there's an interest in stuff that they care about and the longevity of the species, perhaps, because perhaps meat extraction or you know, the animal agriculture is damaging to the environment. And that would be a person who is vegan for environmental reasons. Now, Lewis asserts that only only people who are vegan, I guess as part of as a function of an ethical system, are really vegan. But I don't know where the hell he's getting that from. Like, what motivates that? This sounds almost like how people argue about what the definition of a Christian is. Like, it's... I don't know.
I've always used a definition quite similar to the vegan societies, that veganism, ethical veganism as I see it, is a minimization to the highest extent practicable of all forms of animal suffering. Now, the vegan society includes the term exploitation. I think this is potentially quite a vague...
let's look at this. Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. Okay.
An unhelpful term because it itself is a term that has myriad definitions. So I'll stick with suffering.
I actually really love the vegan society definition, and I'm glad Alex uses it because I think it is a very good definition. I know that some people disagree with me on this, but I'm happy to defend it. I think that the vegan society definition as it stands should be left as it is.
Interesting thing about the definition that I've given here.
I hope he actually, elaborates on that later here, because it just seems like a dogmatic assertion. I'm not getting this.
A minimization of animal suffering is that as long as the animal doesn't suffer, it would seem that whatever you're doing accords with this definition of veganism. So there's some argument to be made that if you did have an animal who lived a perfectly good life, potentially a net positive life, so it's a good thing that they came into existence, and then you killed them genuinely painlessly, that not only is this something that you're kind of allowed to do to not be a vegan, but according to this definition of veganism, that would be a vegan thing to do because it wouldn't be causing any animal suffering.
Because, Alex, the way that you've changed the definition is what causes the problems. Exploitation is pretty easy to understand. It is the use of another individual rather than their equal treatment. So Kant would define exploitation as treating an individual as a means to an end rather than an end in themselves.
I don't think that's necessarily exploitation. You can treat people as a means to an end passively, right? Like, you can, as a general rule, just regard people in the abstract as being for things to be used for your benefit, but you may not actually engage in that at any point in your life. You may completely fail to do so. Like a cynical McDonald's employee who is only exploited and doesn't manage to exploit anybody else might nonetheless think to themselves, people are just for my manipulation and personal aggrandizement, but they, like Squidward may love the idea of exploiting other people, but that doesn't mean that he does it. Like, these are separate things. Oh, hey, Zenzi. I'm also not seeing how he changes the definition. So Lewis said that Cosmic Skeptic changed the definition. I don't think that he did. Maybe he'll clarify this in a second.
And I think that this is most appropriate for this definition. I think that the equal consideration of animals requires the equal consideration of their interests in ethical judgments. And so the notion of exploitation is fundamental for their consideration. And you'll find that you do this time and time again, Alex. You'll say, wait a minute, if we replace animals and humans in this, is that a justified conclusion? And the reason you are doing so is because you realize that we treat individual humans as ends in themselves, whilst we treat animals, atypically in society, as means to an end. And so replacing animals and humans allows us to make sure that we are treating animals as an end in themselves.
I think a potentially more helpful way to think about this is...
Yeah, so this is wrong. He doesn't change the definition. Lewis just asserted that he did and then complained about his issue with exploitation. Exploitation can have multiple understandings on Cosmic Skeptic's view, but on Lewis's, it just means a certain reading of Kant's, which I think is wrong. Moreover, animals' interests. I don't like this language. Like, typically when we think of interests, if we want to insist on Kantian use, interests aren't just things that are good for you. Interests are things that are good for you, that you understand to be good for you. Like, you hold them in your understanding. Like, there's a rule around them. These are things that I know are in my interest, and I act towards them. I take an interest, right? Interest always involves some consciousness of the thing that is in your interest. Now, we can redescribe things that are good for other things as quote-unquote in their interest, but they don't actually take an interest in those things. Am I off base? Is that making sense? Like, I'm not denying that we can't take, for example, what is conducive to the health of an animal as we understand it into our ethical considerations, and that these things can be very important, but this language of interests, it doesn't seem to work. I don't think there's psychological content there that I don't think is at the very least universally applicable to non-human animals. Is there a better word for things that are good for you? Well, it could just be things that are good for you. I mean, like, depends on what we mean by what is good for you. Like, I don't think the universe necessarily recognizes what is good for a cow, but we can understand what causes a cow to live in a way that appears to maximize the qualities that we appreciate in a cow, and perhaps that accord with the cow's, level of enjoyment or lack of pain or something. And we can characterize that as what's good for it. But yeah, we say benefits, basically. Although, to be fair, there's a debate about subconscious interest. Maybe. I mean, I think we have to settle some definitional ambiguities first before we even get into that kind of comparison, right? I think the issue here is that interest is simply being asserted without any clarification. That's my principal issue. I don't know if Lewis actually has a video explaining his how he conceives of interests, but I mean, if we're talking about Kant, interests are held within the understanding. So that's I just don't understand these like dogmatic assertions. They're a little bit strange.
Is to substitute in a human being. If you're ever having trouble overcoming some kind of vegan ethical dilemma, it's often helpful to put human beings in the same position as the animals and see what your ethical intuitions tell you, at least on first glance. Now, most people's ethical...
I don't like that. Humans have different qualities than non-human animals. It's why we differentiate them. Like, we don't reason with non-human animals. They don't... we don't create moral laws. We don't set moral laws for ourselves in concert with non-human animals, but we do with humans. So, like, there are things that feed into why many people would have, I should say, a greater repugnance to the exploitation of humans than for other animals. And it may indeed be the case that Cosmic Skeptic has this intuition that when he sees animal abuse and human abuse side by side, he receives them equally on an emotional level, but that's all he's talking about here is an emotional response. Which is respectable enough if you're upfront about what you're doing.
intuitions.
Also, I apologize if I'm breathing heavily. I may actually have like mild walking pneumonia, I've determined, but we'll try and get through this.
Scream that, of course, there's something wrong with this, although utilitarianism has traditionally been quite a difficult theory to reconcile with this intuition that most of us share, that this would be wrong, because how can it be wrong if morality is just about minimizing suffering and this person's death doesn't cause any suffering? So if you want to say that, yeah, you'd be fine with killing that person in the cabin in the woods, then hey, you're being consistent, so you've got that going for you. But I think most people would want to listen to their intuitions to at least some extent and say, well, I'm convinced that it's wrong to kill a human being in that context, even if it causes no suffering. So maybe suffering isn't the only metric involved, and in that case, if you have an animal and you're killing it, even if there's no suffering involved, there might still be a problem with that. I just think we need to be consistent.
When you replace animals and humans and you rely upon intuitions, you are relying upon something ungrounded. You are relying upon how you feel.
Yeah, so this is right. So actually, I'm pleasantly surprised that Lewis is responding to this correctly.
Rather than any form of argumentation. You can't necessarily go, well, wait a minute, is this wrong from a utilitarian standpoint? If it's right from a utilitarian standpoint, then you must accept it as a utilitarian or reject your normative ethic. This is why I would recommend questioning your normative framework.
To apply a concept like the right...
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, he's right there. This is an on-point response. Is anyone familiar with ask yourselves name the trait argument? I made myself familiar with it and then I forgot it. I just find these debates so incredibly boring, just because of the way they're handled, not because the subject matter is boring.
To life to non-human animals. I'm not even sure that it can practically work. The reason for that is that we might think that it's wrong to kill non-human animals, or that we should minimize it as much as we can, that it's generally a bad thing, fine. But if you have a right to something, that implies a level of inviolability. That's what distinguishes a right from other kinds of moral prescriptions, is that if you have a right to something, you essentially have an inviolable claim over that thing. And it doesn't matter what the other circumstances are, this thing doesn't get violated. That's what a right is.
A right does not necessarily imply inviolability, it implies inalienability, at least to some degree. I would say that a right should not be violated, that we ought not trespass upon the subjectivity of another, but this relies upon an ethical system and a rule of law which allows for certain exceptions to occur. I know that in this you say, Alex, that, well, wait a minute, well, we could have specificationism and then point towards individual circumstance where this right would not apply. I actually don't think this is necessary even in this scenario.
Down phrase, the right to life. So here's the...
Hang on. Inalienability, not inviolability. I think it depends on what kind of right we're talking about. If we're talking about natural right, inalienable and inviolable from a Hobbesian standpoint. If we're talking from, I don't know, like legal rights, I mean, technically inalienable and violable, but, or sorry, technically both. Well, they can be violated. Yeah, unless we're talking about specifically natural right, I don't think the distinction makes sense. You can violate legal rights. You can't really violate natural right on a lot of readings, because natural right typically has to do with what kinds of behaviors can be compelled sort of in a normative way. So, like your right to life in a Hobbesian sense, you have it under all conditions, and you have the right to defend your life, regardless of whatever else normatively permits some other body to take it. Like if you make a trade, I will let you kill me for $500,000 or something. Even though I've made that trade, I have the right to defend myself when pay time comes. Does that make sense?
The problem with trying to grant that kind of inviolability, that right to life, to non-human animals. As things currently stand, and this might not be the case in principle, I'm not really sure, I wouldn't want to say either way, but certainly in practice, it is currently impossible, it's not possible, to avoid killing animals in the production of food for human sustenance, right? Now, of course, we can eat plants, but do bear in mind that growing plants, or all plant-based agriculture, involves animal death, not just from pesticides and habitat destruction, but also like the effect of transporting food, the environmental costs, all of this kind of stuff. It involves a lot of animal deaths, is what I'm trying to say. Now, of course, the vegan response to this is to say that, yes, growing plants kill some animals.
He's mixing up two different things here. So, so he's put his finger on something. So he's talking about right in the sense of that which is inviolable in reality, not just inviolable as an idea, right? We're not just conceiving of a right that is inviolable, we're describing it. An essential part of its description is that it is inviolable in practice. Therefore, if it is violated, it is not a right. But I think he's mistaken. So insofar as animals are killed, that does not mean that they do not have a right to life. The right to life would be the cow in the corral about to be executed has the right to struggle with all its might to get loose. And we cannot tell the cow, you do not have the right to do that. That has the right to do that. It can be unfelicitous in its endeavor to save itself, but that doesn't mean it lacks the right to do so. So I think animals do have a right to life in that sense. So he's right in his conception of right, sort of, at least in a superficial way. The fact that he brings to bear the fact that animals are killed as a... Because again, like, rights have to do with not so much... Rights have to do with what you, or what a subject can do. Rights don't have to do with simply what happens to a subject. Now, if something can be done to what a subject can do, then that thing is not a right in sort of this like Hobbesian natural sense. which is the sense in which Cosmic Skeptic appears to be using it. However, the right to struggle for your life seems to be something that we can't actually obviate. So.
Animals, but a lot more crops, a lot more plants are used to feed livestock than to feed human beings. So if we're trying to minimize the amount of animal suffering we're responsible for, we can either grow some crops, which does kill some animals, and then eat those crops, or grow even more crops, killing even more animals, to then feed those crops to livestock, to then kill those animals, to eat those animals. And it's clear which is going to contribute least to animal suffering and death.
It's true that many vegans, and even myself, will retort at times when people say, well, look at crop deaths. You kill animals to produce crops. We will retort, well, no, we would kill more animals to produce crops, to feed to animals, to then kill those animals. It's the trophic pyramid. We have to kill more animals in crop deaths alone before we even reach the point of killing the livestock, because we need more energy to produce the cows, the chickens, and the pigs, from which we will then slaughter. And this is a good retort. But another retort is that we aren't intentionally killing these animals. These are accidental deaths which we are seeking to avoid. And I mean seeking to avoid. Vegans are against crop deaths if we can avoid them. We are actively looking for solutions for crop deaths. If you look at the work of Earthling Ed, he is looking at alternative forms of agriculture to minimize the amount of lives taken in the production of crops. He's looking at things like vertical farming. And even if you are not a fan of vertical farming, other vegans are looking at alternative forms of farming which don't use pesticides. Veganic farming, for example. There are numerous vegan movements set up to reduce crop deaths because we recognize that we ought respect the right to life of animals simpliciter. This includes the ones in crop production. However, we also have the obligation to feed ourselves and sustain ourselves in order to even engage in this ethical conversation.
Think of...
This seems to completely miss the point. He hasn't actually objected to Cosmic Skeptic's point. Now, Cosmic Skeptic's point isn't good. The first half is good. Like, his construal of right, I think, is on point. I don't think Lewis's is. But his argument about why animals don't have rights, or have a right to life in particular, is fraught.
Human rights, like the right to life in a human context. If the only way that I could get food in order to stop myself from starving was to go and kill another person, legally or morally, I don't think this can be justified. There might be some ethical theories, certainly like egoism, almost certainly would say so. But I think most people's, at least their ethical intuitions, would say that I don't get to go and murder somebody because it's the only way to feed me. Even if it means I starve, that doesn't mean I have the right to go and take someone else's life. Why? Well, potentially because they have this thing called the right to life. They have a right that I can't violate, even if it means that I'm going to starve to death. Let's say I need to like murder them to steal their food or something like that.
Yeah, see, this misses the point. Animals have a right to endeavor, in like a limited sort of instinctive sense, to preserve their lives. God, it's getting really cold in here. Maybe that's why I'm feeling so gross. Let's fix this. Yeah. Burn. There we go. The fact that multiple creatures vying for their existence end up killing one another in the process doesn't violate their right to life. They're all acting within right in doing so. It's just that's why in a state of nature everything sucks, because you know we're ripping each other limb from limb for the sake of our own preservation. What we're talking about here is like, will God reward you with a mansion in heaven given your hypocrisy and killing animals to produce crops? Like, I don't care. This is not a material part of the question. It doesn't matter how virtuous vegans are being. It doesn't bear on the question of whether animals have a right to life.
That. This isn't something we think is justified. If we were to apply that right to life to non-human animals, then now consider the animals that are killed in crop production.
What we can point towards in this scenario is what is called the rule of double effect. Now, you point towards a scenario in which, well, if a human must kill an animal to survive, its right to life no longer applies. This is absolutely false. So what the rule of double effect teaches us is that at times when we have conflicting duties, we should choose the duty which is the highest order. That means the duty which we are most bound to, that which we are most obligated or obliged to respect. This comes at points in which we have no choice but to respect one duty over another.
I see what's going on. So Lewis is conceiving of right in the sense of like a liberal right. So a higher power, I don't know what this would be in this case, maybe some cosmic ethical order that he projects onto the world, which is a very bad reading of Hegel, by the way, but you know, there's some higher thing that confers rights on things, and that compels us to respect the rights of other things. But that's not what natural right means, or the right to life. There is no higher power in this context, which is why we invoke natural rights, not legal rights or like ethical rights or whatever you want. I don't know if ethical rights is a category, but you know what I mean. Lewis is talking about rights in the sense of like you have a legal right to a thing under a thing, and he's projecting basically a legal structure onto the world at large.
For example, if an individual attacks you in the street and you have to defend yourself, do they have the right to life? Of course they do. But you have the right to self-defense. You have the right to life. It's not that they no longer have the right to life. It's that in respecting your right to life, in respecting your greater obligation to your right to life and your right to self-defense, that you are unfortunately forced to end their life.
The crucial thing about rights is that they don't require respect. That's what's crucial. Legal rights require respect, because if they aren't respected by the authority that holds us all in awe and compels us to, keep to our contracts and respect the rights that we've given unto each other to form the community, then those rights are fictions. But when we're talking about natural rights, things as basic as the right to life, that's not. I'm going to be right back. I'll just be one moment. I need to get some water. All right.
Unless it can be avoided. And this is why we have use of force laws. You're not allowed to kill someone simply because they attack you. You have to use reasonable force, if possible, to deter the attacker or prevent them from harming you without using lethal force when necessary. You do not need to negate the right to life of an animal in order to respect.
Oh, see, he's so close. He's getting it, but he's trying to impose like this legal framework on it. And that's where this is getting confused.
Your own right to life, which may lead to the animal's death.
We'd have to say the same kind of thing. We'd have to say, if the only way for me to eat is to kill all of these animals, then I just can't eat because they have a right to life that cannot be violated. They're not threatening me in any way or anything like this.
No, because you're not violating something's right to life by killing it. You can't. That's the point. They have the right to defend their lives. They don't have a right to be alive at your expense. They have a right to life.
I'm going over to them and killing them in order to produce food to feed myself. So they have a right.
Think of it this way. A natural right is something that you basically have no impediment towards. And something that you have no impediment towards in nature. This is why in Rousseau we earn kinds of freedom, and in Hegel and Kant as well. We develop new and different kinds of right and freedom by forming a community, because we are now able to do things that we couldn't in a state of nature. But you always have a right to life. But the right to life doesn't mean that you can complain to the cosmos, hey, I'm supposed to be alive. The right to life means that you have the right to vie for your life with whatever tools at your disposal. Right at your disposal.
To life, it means I can't do that. What does that mean? It means humankind will starve, because as I say, as things currently stand, we can definitely minimize animal death and suffering by eating plants, but we can't eliminate it. We can't get rid of animal.
Yeah, so this doesn't mean that animals don't have a right to life. This means that humans have a right to kill animals to live. That's what it means.
Death in even just plant-based agriculture. So if they had this right to life in the same way that humans do, we'd be in big trouble.
And if you are being consistent here, Alex, you would come to the conclusion that because of agriculture causing deaths of humans, if we all have a right to life, then agriculture itself would be impossible. Driving cars would be impossible. Operating anything in society would be impossible. Agriculture is especially bad, being the most dangerous primary industry within the UK. Many deaths, not just caused from interaction with animals, but also from farm equipment itself, which is incredibly dangerous. Do we have the right to life if farmers die during crop production, Alex? Should we negate the human right to life? If you are going to be against rights itself and a rights-based approach, make that clear.
The rights are of individuals, they aren't of the species. This is why we talk about individual natural right in the state of nature. This doesn't address Cosmic Skeptic's point. Even though Cosmic Skeptic's point is wrong.
Explain why you're against it, rather than say that an animal could not have the right to life.
The problem. Think of human rights, like the right to life in a human context. If the only way that I could get food in order to stop myself from starving was to go and kill another person, legally or morally, I don't think this can be justified.
But there are numerous examples in history in which people have used extreme measures.
No, because if the only way you can survive is by killing another person, you're not in a moral situation. Morality is downstream from ethics, and ethics is established by a concert of rational beings creating an ambience in which you can have laws, right? It's like a kind of human biome. If the only thing you can do to survive is to kill other human beings, just in abstract, not like simply other ethical communities or people outside of your community, then you don't actually have moral incumbencies on you. At least not in the way that as far as I'm aware, any of the ethical theorists that Lewis is relying upon characterize both.
For example, killing another individual to sustain themselves, and yet they have not went to prison. This is exactly the reason why if a vegan is on a desert island, yes, he can eat a pig. And this is exactly why I will say, if I'm on a desert island and it's me and somebody else, well then, I'm sorry, but it's also somebody else.
Again, he's right, but he's bringing up legality again. This has no bearing.
This isn't because I don't think they have the right to life, and this isn't because I wouldn't respect their right to life if I could respect it. If I could sustain myself on this island with them and we could mutually survive, then we ought do so.
It has nothing to do with respect. Respecting a right to life, respecting it has nothing to do with whether or not a right is there. A legal right must be respected by the relevant parties. A natural right, no.
But if not, then we are in a state of war, and normal ethics does not apply. Our rights are 100% based upon our institutions and our engagements with each other, our ability to satisfy our system of drives. In fact, this is why we have conflictions in duties when rights come into conflict. If I have a right to feed myself, but I'm in a society which is making me starve, then I am obligated to steal. But I'm also...
Rights don't come into conflict. Individual subjects with rights come into conflict because of their rights. These are different things. If they're rights by dint of, if they conflict, then one of them isn't a right.
Also obligated to not steal because you have a right to private property. This is a tragic scenario, and this is what ethics seeks to overcome in our society.
Does someone who needs a kidney have a natural right to do anything they can? Oh, you deleted the comment. But yes, if somebody needs a kidney to live, then they have the right to do anything in their power to get that kidney. Which is really to say that there's nothing you can say to them to impede them from vying for it. Because those kinds of rights aren't really a normative thing. They're describing what a person can do under what a subject rather can do, period, under any circumstances, unimpeded. We are not impeded by our contracts from keeping ourselves alive. Would you say that ethics and the social contract are necessarily connected? Absolutely. Now, that's not necessarily to say that I take a contractual approach to the legitimization of authority, or the state, but a social contract is one way in which we understand the emergence of an ethical sphere.
When we have to violate the rights of one individual to respect the rights of another, we can see that there must be some sort of institutional change that needs to be made in order to resolve and cease this conflict. And this is how ethics progress within a Hegelian institutional format. And it's worth noting.
Hang on, let's go back. What did he say? He said Hegelian. My red flags are going up.
The rights of another, we can see that there must be some sort of institutional change that needs to be made in order to resolve and cease this conflict. And this is how ethics progress within a Hegelian institutional format. And it's worth noting that Hegel wrote the book, The Philosophy of Right. Right in German meaning legal rights. This whole philosophy is about abstract right and natural right. The right he believes is entailed in our very being.
No, it's not just legal right. It's not just legal right. Right. Even Kant distinguishes between legal right and ethical right, and absolutely, so does Hegel.
So you could just say that the non-human animal's right to life is a different kind of right to life to a human being. Maybe in a human context, I'm allowed to kill...
Oh, and here's the distinction, by the way. So a legal right is just a right that's imposed within, like, a community, and enforced as an imperative by an authority. Ethical law, by contrast, sorry, not we're talking about law, not right. But yeah, but we are talking about in the sense of legal rights, right? Okay. An ethical law, by contrast, is something that is an imperative as by dint of the law itself, right? So right in this context, it's more about the ability to do something. It's more about the unimpedable ability to do something. It's like the cosmos itself confers that right, because reality itself protects the ability of a thing to defend itself with whatever tools are at its disposal when its life is threatened. So it's like the logic of the world protects that right, if that makes sense.
Kill you only if you're threatening me, but in a non-human context, I'm allowed to kill you just if it's necessary for me to survive, or something like this. But if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to offer an analysis of rights that explains why one creature has this kind of right and one creature has this kind of right. And I think it also muddies the term right to life and makes it vague and essentially something that changes depending on who it applies to. The whole point of having this system of rights is that, for instance, in human rights, the idea is that if you're a human, you have this right. That's it. No questions asked. Simple.
The same right to life applies. If it's necessary for survival, and it means that we have to fight and kill each other to survive, I think that we are justified in doing so. And this is not controversial. This has happened throughout history. If we're being honest with ourselves, if our society had some sort of catastrophic level event, doomsday apocalypse, zombie apocalypse level event, in which no supplies are available, the only supplies exist in the hands of a few people who will not share them, and we are forced to take action in order to survive, we are absolutely justified in doing so. I would not argue that this was the same as being a murderer in a normal context. Clearly, the social scenario is different. Clearly, the normal ethical rules of society are breaking down. This is an extreme, and this has no applicability upon whether we can respect the right to life.
Yes, you see? So morality is downstream from ethics, which is socially contingent. There, we have it.
An individual within our normal contemporary society. Just as if we have the option to respect an animal's right to life in terms of crop production, we ought to do so. We should be looking for modes of farming to replace our current means of farming to reduce crop deaths.
So I don't really think it's probably helpful.
Sorry. I couldn't get something. Are rights concerned with what one can do, or also with what one needs to live? A right is what you can do. A natural right, rather, is what you can always do. And you are always able to do whatever is in your power to live. So that's why that's a natural right. And there's no way to normatively alienate that from somebody. So. And there's no way to violate it either. It's both inviolable and inalienable.
Thing to do to argue that animals have a right to life, certainly not in the way that humans do. I think it's better to say something like they have a right to avoid or to not have inflicted upon them unnecessary or wanton suffering. I think that's a much easier position to defend and would be
Hang on, let me re-listen to that.
Animals have a right to life, certainly not in the way that humans do. I think it's better to say something like they have a right to avoid or to not have inflicted upon them unnecessary or...
No, that's a mistake. They have the right to avoid suffering, absolutely. Human beings don't always have the right to avoid suffering because we can actually contract out suffering. Like, for example, we don't have the right to avoid paying taxes per se, and if we are forced to do so, that is not a violation of our rights. And we can suffer from that. I mean, life is pain. And it's not... Like, a right in that sense doesn't actually compel other people to not do things to you. That's what's crucial. The animal has the right to avoid suffering, but that doesn't mean that we have an obligation to not make animals suffer. We may have obligations to not make animals suffer to ourselves for other reasons. And those are going to be more, like, ethical and you know, they're going to stand upon some social stilts. But he's so close. You go to Oxford, man. How do you not know this? Actually, like, seriously, like, I'm being generous here because, like, you know, he's trying. But he shouldn't be trying. He should be succeeding. This is basic.
wanton suffering. I think that's a much easier position to defend and would be consistent with our views regarding human beings.
Ironically, Alex, I don't think that this is an easier position to defend, precisely for the reason that you were pushed in the debate with Armin Navabadi to concede that killing an animal would be justified so long as it didn't suffer and no other animals witnessed it being killed. This is something I absolutely disagree with, and in my debate with Armin Navabadi presented a position in which considered the right to life of the animal and considered its interests within a narrative framework. Just because an animal's not self-conscious, just because an...
Again, just asserting that it has interests, first of all, that's implied and not defended, and secondly, saying that its interests must inform our consideration of what we can do as human beings, and this is just unsubstantiated.
Animal doesn't think towards the future doesn't mean its future doesn't matter, because it has a right to life, because its life is valuable inherently.
To whom? What do you mean invaluable inherently? What the hell does that mean? Nothing's value is inherent. Value is always the value of a subject. Even in Marx, it's the value incurred upon it by a subject, in this case the community or the market or something. So you believe that if someone kills another for a kidney right now to survive, they shouldn't be punished? No. I just believe that there's nothing we can actually do to prevent someone from killing somebody else if that's what they need to do to live. Except kill them. And we wouldn't be violating their right to life by doing so. We'd just be ending their life.
So Alex, although I appreciate the video, I think you've totally...
It's the right... The key part here is not the right to life. It's the right to life.
misunderstood what rights actually entail. Rights aren't inviolable. In fact, they're inalienable. Even from an individualist approach like yourself, where you're coming from maybe as a liberal standpoint, rights can be violated and trespassed upon so long as they're compensated. Robert Nozick
Rights are inviolable and inalienable. He's so close, but he's not there.
talks about this in relation to the principle of compensation and the right to property. Our rights can be violated under certain circumstances. This doesn't mean that rights don't exist. It just means that we can have obligations which supersede our obligations to other rights at times. This is ultimately to respect what is right. What is right is what is rational and reasonable to do. And sometimes that means resolving a conflict between two duties on one duty alone and having to consider that over another duty. I consider my right to life before I consider an animal's right to life, or before I consider the right to life of a random stranger who's attacking me.
Because qua you, or not qua you, but from your perspective, the right of other animals doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter. Right is a description of what a specific subjectivity can do. Period. And that's that. So, oh, there was an interesting comment here that I'll respond to before I disappear for a second, because My right to life is driving me to do so. I feel like death right now. Let's see. In academic circles, ethics and morality tend to be used interchangeably, but in informal setting, we tend to think of morality as individual. There is a very strong tendency I have observed in philosophy departments, and this is why I mentioned in my response to Anti-Citizen X that philosophy tends to have it's a bit notorious in other departments for being historically disinterested. The concepts morality and ethics are established by political philosophy and not by philosophy simpliciter. And the political is a contingent and highly pragmatic category that is not universal. So there are some inheritances that are not philosophically, unchallengeable that feed into a lot of moral philosophy.
This is where we're at. And this is what rights are about. And this is how rights are legally established. Alex, if you ever
Well, I mean, it's how they're legally established, but you're wrong about everything else.
want to have a conversation about this, or if you want to have a
Oh, for God's sake. Don't have a conversation with this boob. Anyways, I'm going to disappear for a few minutes. This has been that segment, and we'll look at something a little more chill afterwards, I think. Alright. I'm still alive, but I was hacking my lungs out. As you can probably tell, I'm still like red. So I'm probably gonna call this one early today, just because I am sicker than I thought I was apparently. But I guess we got one segment done. Brilliant. I guess we'll look at the other stuff later on. I might have to just take a couple days off, honestly. I've been pushing myself a bit too hard recently. I've been pushing myself a bit too hard recently, so I think I need to actually take a day. I feel guilty when I take days off. Like, I don't know. No, I do not smoke. I'm allowing myself to smoke when I hit 50, though. Yeah. So we're gonna call this one early. I'm just totaled. But I've been drinking an ungodly amount of fluids. Katsumi, but thank you. Yeah, but I'll publish the segment. I'll probably depublish the office hour stream itself just because it's not really good representation. Do you think you have COVID-19? I have no idea. I called to arrange a test, and Canada has a callback system right now. And they called me back at 6 a.m. and I'm woken up by my phone. And my phone glitches out as I'm picking it up, and I'm trying to swipe and it won't. It's frozen. It's a stupid old Samsung thing. And right as I manage to, they hang up. So I call them back. And puts you back to the same menu. So I'm waiting again on another callback. So hopefully I actually get this one. Do you think perspective philosophy is bad faith or just not that bright? These are not mutually exclusive statements. I would have only said the latter until the doomer politics thing. I do not think he is a good faith actor. William Kurt says your Anti-Citizen X video is great, thank you. Although I didn't understand your dismissal of Plantinga, I don't agree with him either, but his work on modal epistemology can't be called bad philosophy. Well, maybe you're right and I'm just ignorant of that, but my general impression is that he's not super well respected outside of the narrow, a very, very narrow subsection of fairly interested, shall we say, audiences. COVID can cause long-term coughing. I haven't been coughing that much. The main thing has just been like I periodically have episodes where it feels like my lungs are like rock solid. It's weird. And it's not a heart issue. I've rolled that out. But also I do like a super physical job. Like I would have symptoms resulting from physical exertion if that was the case. So my suspicion is I either have like a very mild case of COVID or I have some kind of walking pneumonia. That's really what I think. Modal metaphysics. I don't even know what that is, to be honest. But yeah, so we're gonna call it here. We'll do another office hours, like a proper one, soon. For anybody who's not familiar with the format, of course, this is only the second one we've done. But the basic idea is that when I do these, I just have my camera on while I'm doing my own research and my own work and whatnot, and you can just talk to me during that point. And I often have like segments planned, like I did with this. But yeah. COVID can cause episodes. Well, it's good to know. And you use what are you talking about, chemicals? Oh, do I use chemicals at work? Actually, it's funny. A lot of my respiratory issues started... Like, I've had anxiety attacks for as long as I can remember. Basically, I think the first one I had was like a couple of days before the first Iron Man movie came out. Because I remember, like, gasping for breath in the theater. But for a couple of years... Well, for a year, I worked for a cleaning company. Very nice people. It was actually one of my better working experiences. But we would be like in confined spaces cleaning people's homes, including like showers and whatnot. And we would have like star spray. And we'd be spraying all around us to clean like these shower walls. And it would just come down into your face. And I remember one time I stopped by a bookstore on the way home from work. And as I was walking through, my throat closed up. It's like, ugh, I couldn't breathe. It was like one of the biggest panics of my life. And eventually, like, it opened up again, but I think what happened was I did some kind of damage to my airway from like a degreaser fluid we were using. So I've been very prone to respiratory issues since then. I haven't had anything serious, but like it's a constant terror. To be fair, people can go through modalities of being bad faith, where they are uncharacteristically bad faith in moments of weakness. I don't think so. I think with respect to perspective philosophy, which I take you to be referring to, I think the issue with him is that at the end of the day, he conceives of himself as becoming successful as the novel vegan activist who deploys Hegel. And to that end, he doesn't really have a whole lot of standards. He picks opportunistic fights with anybody and everyone. It's funny, actually, because he's the one who suggested having a debate with me, or having a conversation with me on stream about my critiques of his work. And then he, for some reason, when I, out of basically outrage, said, like, look, your promotion of this Doomer Politics video speaks very poorly of you. By the way, when are we doing that debate? Because I had intentions of just wiping the floor with him at that point. He said, no, I'm not going to do you the favor, something along those lines. And then he went on Twitter and was like, this guy's just like clout chasing. It's like, this is your career. This is all you do is clout chase. I objectively don't clout chase. I made a ton of subscribers off of defending, not just defending Vosh, to be clear. The Doomer Politics videos are very insidious in that they use Vosh as a target because he's unliked by a lot of people, but they target a lot of leftists at large, which is why it's had such good uptake among people like Sargon. But I defended Vosh from that Doomer Politics video, from the spurious accusations in that Doomer Politics video, and gained a ton of subscribers from a shout-out that he made, which I'm very appreciative of, but not so appreciative of that he now owns me because I then sided with Professor Flowers against Vosh. So I am I am not clout chasing. That is one thing I cannot be accused of being, or of doing. And funnily enough, despite everything, despite him saying that my takes on his ethical arguments are bad, he has not actually responded to a single one. So I'll take that to mean I'm right. Because I conjecture that if my takes were so bad and that he could easily just bat them down, then he would. He would even do it in text. He would just write a tweet. This is the mistake he's making, idiot. And that'd be that. It doesn't have anything to do. Am I going to partner with Haz for a debate? Haz is apparently going to debate Stefan Molyneux, and his debate partner dropped out. I have some issues with Haz. I don't hate the guy. I have some issues with him, but pursuant to taking down Stefan Molyneux, I'll team up with a bull in a china shop for that. But I don't know if that's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. But honestly, like, I think that'd actually be a fairly advantageous team up. Because Haz is, for lack of a better word, violent in a way I'm not. And that opens the door for me to, be a nice good cop, bad cop thing. Doomer would not even want to chat with fellow Traveler, who necessarily dislike Vosh, because I guess he thinks Trav is too soft as mod in your argument with you. Doomer's an idiot. What Doomer does is immaterial. What's the next edited video going to be? Well, I believe I owe people episode 4 of why Doomer Politics is unironically evil. So I'm probably going to do that soon. That's mostly done. It just has to be recorded, which obviously this kind of thing sort of hinders you. Really, I shouldn't even be doing this. I'm just stupid, I guess. But then I have a couple things in the works. One is the invention of Japan as sort of an addendum to my Against Nationalism series, which shows the... It's a really interesting history, actually. If you want to get ahead of the current, I think you can find this on LibGen. This book, Reinventing Japan, Time, Space, and Nation by Tessa Morris Suzuki. I highly recommend it. Very, very good. Very interesting. That's going to be a major source. Oh, get in there. Go. Just religion getting in the way of everything. There we go. And then I have a patron video that I want to get the first part done in the next couple of weeks, and that's a systematic critique of The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper. And then what else do I have planned? Well, I've got Dune videos coming out because Dune is coming out, so there's that. Apparently, one of my mods is going to join me to chat about that at some point. That should be fun. And yeah, other than that, who knows? You should react to Philosophy Tube's latest video. Which one is that? Philosophy Tube. I saw she had a recent video. Oh, Islamophobia. Yeah, I could look at that one. That'd be interesting. I like how she doesn't even try to make her her covers correspond to the content of her videos anymore. Although I do like that this one has chess on the front. Unless that's representing somebody I'm not clicking. That's not clicking in my brain. Keep in mind that some of Haz's fans have been toxic to Vietnamese vlogger Luna Avoy. Yeah, that's one of the things I have against Haz. I think his treatment of Luna was despicable, frankly. And unnecessary and stupid. And Haz is generally not a stupid man, so that was disappointing to see. I don't think he needs to be told that, though. I think he's felt the heat from all the subscribers he's lost from it. Oh yeah, and another thing, I'm going to be doing a long stream just going through School of Life's butcheries of political philosophy. That may come sooner than all of the aforementioned. So, yeah. I see that you're currently reading Aristotle. Do you have any favorite pre-Socratic philosophers? Just the typical one. I mean, Heraclitus is interesting. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty rough right now, so I'm going to call it right now. Actually, I'm going to stop blabbering. So thanks for joining me. This will be unlisted, but it won't be privated, so if you want to see the whole stream, God knows why you would, but if you want to see the whole stream, you can. I will be separating and uploading the segment on Perspective Philosophy's response to Cosmic Skeptic basically when I end the stream, so that'll be available to watch very soon. And no Thales? I haven't read Thales. I mean, I probably have read Thales at some point, because I went through the Hackett Introduction to Ancient Greek Political, or Readings in Ancient Greek Political Philosophy, which is a very good volume, by the way. And that comes with that, and I believe I went through it at some point, but I've largely lost it. Which, as far as I'm concerned, means I didn't read it. Oh my god. Just work with me, please, bookshelf. I do everything for you. Okay. I need more shelves. Okay. Oh yeah, DeBotton is a moron. I hate that guy so much. Anyways, take care. Ciao.